Welcome back. We're here again with Father Edward Connolly, who is a priest of the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Welcome back, Father.
Thank you, Mr. Buono.
We are talking today about the theology of the body, and we're taking a practical look at this study and how it's being propagated. Let's start with, I think most practically, what is the theology of the body?
Well, that's a term that has been applied to a whole series of discourses given by Pope John Paul II over the course of years. And all of them, taken together and compiled, have been called the theology of the body. I'm not sure that that's the best terminology, but it'll do until a better one comes along. And a superb exponent of the theology of the body is a young man named Christopher West, whose name is well known, I think, to many people, who has written some books that are summaries of it. He's written books for the professionals, for the experts, and also books for the lay reader.
So this is really a study of sex, isn't it, Father? The theology of the body.
Well, that's a rather direct way of putting it. Yes, you could say that. I would prefer to call it as a study of the nuptial meaning of the body, or as you put it so elegantly, it's a study of sex. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm about this study because it does have sex at the center of it. I mean,
yes.
You could argue that it's a little too much focus on the sex part of it and not enough on the human person part of it.
Well, the word sex, of course, is a scary word for many people, and so that's why we smile when we say it's the theology of sex. Years ago, I taught a course in college, and we called it the theology of marriage and sexuality. I like that, theology of marriage and sexuality. And the great discovery is this. You may have noticed this yourself, Mr. Buono. When you think about yourself, you take time just to think about yourself. Have you ever focused on the fact that you have a body, that you're physical? Have you ever noticed that?
I have noticed that once in a while.
I've noticed it too, that I have a body, because sometimes I go to the bathroom, and there's most bathrooms have mirrors in them, and I look in the mirror and I say, by golly, there's somebody looking back at me, and that wouldn't happen unless I was physical. Now, of course, I'm being a little lighthearted about this whole thing, but the point is this: a human being is not an exclusively spiritual entity, okay? A human being is necessarily and essentially a body which is animated by a spirit, okay, or the spirit has an external manifestation. But sometimes in the history of Christianity, the connection between the soul and the body has not been sufficiently appreciated. I think even now, there are many people who are lifelong Christians who, when they think about heaven, they think about disembodied spirits. They think that human beings are going to to join the angelic choirs. We will never join the angelic choirs. I presume we will have some sort of interaction with the angels, but we will never be angels. We will be resurrected human beings. Persons who are in heaven right now, even as we speak, are not complete. And you say, oh, what do you mean they're not complete? I thought they were complete. They're in heaven. You say, well, they're waiting for their bodies. They're waiting for their bodies. There are only two, as far as we know, human bodies in heaven at the present time, and they are, of course, the human bodies of Jesus and of Mary. But everyone else, they're waiting for the resurrection.
Right. And this all centers on the fact that our bodies play a role in our salvation, and our bodies are controllable. They're part of the decision-making process. They're not just excuses for why we sin, right? I mean, the body made me do it type of thing. Although we know maybe seems some connection or some explanation needed for the flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing, that St. Paul would talk about. But somewhere in there, we have to know that the body plays an integral role in getting us to heaven, and we have to respect that.
Sure. We carry our bodies with us, and they are our partners, and we are inseparable from our bodies. And death was never intended by God in the first place. The separation of soul and body was never part of the divine plan. Death came into the world, by which we mean the separation of soul and body, by the envy of the devil. That's the way the Book of Wisdom puts it. But it was not part of the divine plan. Actually, the separation of soul and body is a disastrous thing. It has been repaired only by the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. That's why the resurrection of Jesus, that's one reason why the resurrection of Jesus from the dead is such a mind-boggling, incident, because it's the coming together permanently of human body and human soul, and living permanently in heaven. When Jesus ascended into heaven, that was the first time that a human body ever entered into heaven. Sometimes people wonder why we celebrate the ascension of the Lord into heaven, why that is such a theologically important feast. It's because a human body went up into heaven. We say, wow, we didn't know that heaven was a place for human bodies, but it is.
That is so interesting. And what comes with talks about the body, I see a lot of the practical application of theology of the body in teaching. So much is centered on what happens when, I guess, you don't have your clothes on, the whole concept of the sexual use of the body. But there has to be something practical in the teachings about how we express ourselves through our body externally to the rest of the world, in everyday life, with clothes on and with appearances. Isn't that right?
Sure. What I do physically, what I do bodily, I do spiritually. My soul is involved in every aspect of my body, okay? My soul is not located inside my body in a certain place, but not elsewhere. My entire soul is located in each part of my body. So people who are not philosophically inclined might think that this is borderline absurd, but it's really not. This is my left thumb. My entire soul is contained within my left thumb. You might say, well, what about your right thumb? It's there too, my entire soul. And you say, well, that's contradictory. Well, we say, no, it's really not. It's really not. My entire soul is contained in each and every part of me. When a man and a woman give their bodies to one another in sexual intimacy, whether they want to or not, they are giving their souls to one another, okay? And so they are investing their very selves in this action, for good or for bad. Therefore, there is no such thing as a trivial, in the sense of unimportant, sexual action. Every sexual action is significant, and therefore an act of sexual intimacy between a sacramentally married husband and wife is an occasion for the giving of sanctifying grace. When a sacramentally married husband and wife give themselves to one another in sexual intimacy, they increase in grace. You say, increase in grace? They increase in holiness. Increase in holiness? You mean sexual intercourse can be an occasion for an increase in holiness? Well, that blows some people's minds, because a lot of people think that sexual intercourse is at best something that God tolerates, but doesn't really favor it. We say, no, it's an occasion of grace. But at the same time, sexual intercourse involving a man and woman who are not entitled to that action is a cause of disgrace. It's disgrace. All sexual sin, whether committed with another person or committed in a solitary manner, is grievous matter, and therefore, if done with sufficient reflection and full consent of the will, is a mortal sin. There's no such thing as a trivial sexual sin.
Yeah. Well, let's take a moment now and hear what our experts have to say on this topic of theology of the body.
Right, I think there can be a tendency to kind of pull the theology of the body out of context, to kind of view it as another way, a new way of life. I think about it in terms of, some of the things that came out in the 70s, meditation and all these different kind of fad things. People are searching for something, for sure. They're searching to find out who they are, what is their purpose in life. And I mean, we're created with that longing, with that need to find out, to discover.
The theology of the body is obviously a very important and, in some good sense, innovative theological emphasis of Pope John Paul II. And he moved right into something that needed to be done. And the young brothers and sisters in our community, who outnumber us 20 to 1, they are all very enthused by this theology, and they find it extremely interesting. An older person like myself tends not quite to have that much appreciation, but I must say that it casts a great deal of light on a very murky modern problem, which is the abuse of sexuality and the abuse of human beings by other human beings. It's profoundly personalistic, which it should be, and brings us to the will of God.
A person, he says, doesn't have a body. He is a body. He is body and soul. And so that was really shocking to me at first. All of these other things that I didn't think were important. I wanted to hear about the theology of the body. I wanted to hear about sex, because, right, that's what the theology of the body is what I thought, But that's a part of it. It's an important part of it because we are male and female. But that's not all of what the theology of the body is about.
The Holy Father, his intention was, and you can see that by the way it developed, his intention was to develop an anthropology to underlie the Church's teaching on morality in marriage, and especially with regard to contraception. Because the dissenters on contraception were constantly trying to say, well, if you're saying that this type of act is immoral, that's physicalism. You're saying that somehow the physical determines morality. And the Holy Father came back with the theology body in spades and said, no, we are body-soul composites, and so what we do with our body is a way of manifesting our personhood. And our personhood is very important.
There's so much really understanding of the culture and philosophy, the air that we breathe as Americans, that you don't realize has an effect on how you perceive the world and how you even perceive the church and the teachings of the church. And so, when we go to the Institute and start learning about Descartes and Bacon and the Enlightenment and the dualistic notions of the body, first you're thinking, wait a minute, I didn't come here for a philosophy lesson. And then all of a sudden, you start to realize how that break between, the body and the person is what has gotten us into so much trouble in our culture. And so, I realized that I needed all of this background in order to understand what the Holy Father was getting at and why he even thought that it was important to talk about something called a theology of the body. I mean, he was interested in recovering the notion of who the human person is.
And I think that in our talking about the theology of the body and about the sacrament of marriage, we have to do so in a way that does not paint a picture so idealistic of the capacity to give oneself totally, that it ignores the things with which people have to wrestle, the fears and the anxieties and the doubts and the disordered desires.
And in fact, I would say this, I have had some minor disagreements with people who were on the same team in terms of orthodoxy with regard to saying that certain activity during courtship is not appropriate. Some people want to say, well, this is the way you do it. You want to do everything in terms of, I want everything I do with you, I want to be a loving thing. And I said, well, you need to be a little bit more specific than that because people are looking at activities, and some of these activities are not helpful. For example, French kissing. You know, I mean, that's very, very stimulating for a normal man. And I guess for some women too, but some women say it's not that stimulating for them. Okay, I believe them. But the thing is that, you know, there are certain activities such as that, and also sitting on the couch and kissing for a half hour. You know, that's not productive. It doesn't help you get to know the person. Geography, yes, but in terms of, you know, personality, it really doesn't help you that much.
The theology of the body is not simply kind of a set of principles that if I follow them, I'll reach happiness. It's not a sort of brand name. It's not a kind of way of life. And in the end, you know, I said earlier that the theology of the body changed my life in a way. Really, it wasn't that. It was Jesus Christ who changed my life. It was what the Holy Father wrote in the theology of the body that was able to unlock something in my heart. And in unlocking that, Christ was able to come into my heart in a way I had not allowed him to before. And so that's kind of where I think there needs to be some caution when we talk about the theology of the body and presenting it to the common person, right? You know, it's not secret knowledge. It's not something that's kind of been hidden away and now it's, you know, open it up and it'll solve your problems. You know, and it's based on the constant teaching of the church, the tradition, saints and mystics. I mean, the Holy Father lived, John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, lived in an amazing time. He lived through Nazism, he lived through communism, he was there for the council. He was around a group of amazing men and women. He really, you know, God put him on this earth at a time when just many things converged to kind of make the ground, the soil fertile for that kind of thought to really bloom.
At the end, there each person seemed to indicate a danger or caution about being too idealistic about how we present theology of the body teachings to others. I've seen this myself in my own observations. There's a tendency to put on a pedestal the theology of the body concepts when it comes to, I don't know, about you know, how one even chooses a partner. You know, in other words, if you're not sold on, or if you've not gotten it all, or not entered into deeper knowledge about the theology of the body, that you are somehow inadequate for marriage. Do you see this tendency?
Oh sure. With all due respect to Christopher West, who's a splendid person and a good teacher, I've been in his company, I admire him. And with all due respect to the Pope John Paul the Great, this theology of the body is not something brand new, okay? Pope John Paul brought it to the fore. He laid it out in a logical pattern, in a way that it can be studied. But basically, the theology of the body is part of the ancient faith, right, because the Word, that's the Word, meaning the capital W word, the second person of the Trinity, became flesh, okay? And so God lodged within or in a body, okay? God took on human flesh. And the very fact that God took on human flesh, there right away you have, well, theology of the body, you know what I mean? There was a heresy in early days of Christianity. Of course, most of these heresies recur. They changed their names. But the heresy was called Docetism. And Docetism, D-O-C-E-T-I-S-M, is the heresy that says that the second person of the Trinity did not really take on a human body, okay? That it was simply an appearance. That's what the word docetim, dokein means to appear. Because many people thought that it would be most inappropriate to speak of God and human flesh joining, you know. But no, God took on human flesh. And Jesus is human even today. You know.
Yeah. Now, in the perspective of, again, idealism, do you believe it's a lot to ask most people who are trying to enter into marriage or are in marriage already to cling to a lot of these ideas? I mean, sometimes I ponder these teachings myself, and I think of how, you know, even in my own life or those who I've talked to, a lot of times the actions of love, at least sexually, that, you know, they happen in moments. There tends to be not a whole lot of reflection on theology in the moments that these are happening, you know, and you know, you don't want people, in other words, feeling guilty that they have some kind of, I guess, mundane or common notions about what they're doing there, but in fact, they're still very beautiful, and they are prompted by the grace of the sacrament, actually, even without the deeper knowledge. I mean, we want the deeper to help us personally as we approach each other, but they are not necessary for being happy or for expressing faithful love.
Right. Are you saying that you think that there are some Catholic couples who have not read all of the Wednesday afternoon addresses of Pope John Paul II and still have had intimacy with one another?
In fact, I'm saying there are probably many who haven't read much of any marriage theology who are probably living happy marriages.
I think you're right. Come to think of it, I don't know that my mother and father ever read a papal encyclical. I'll have to ask them in the next life when I see them. I doubt very much that they ever did. I'd be very surprised if they did. But I think they muddled through quite well, you know. No, of course, we don't have to, you know, understand how a computer works in order to work it. You know, don't have to understand how a car runs in order to drive it. So you're absolutely right. There can be a type of intellectual snobbery that says, oh, you have to read, you know, this theology of the body. You have to read this. You have to understand it. Well, if you're so inclined, go right ahead. But most people are not inclined that way, you know.
Well, you would recommend that single people make this a requisite in choosing a partner, that they have some deeper understanding of the theology of the body before they are marriage material, would you?
No, as a matter of fact, I would not.
Okay, thank you, Father. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always a danger of just, you can't make enthusiasm a prerequisite for anything with the faith. I mean, the faith is not based on how much we feel connected to God. In fact, there are too many saints who seem to have ascended to sainthood, and in the very peaks of their ascension, their spiritual life, felt God wasn't even present to them. So there can't be an absolute connection between enthusiasm and being there where you're meant to be.
Oh, sure, right. Not everyone is called to be a theologian. God forbid that everyone would be. You know, we don't need that. So if anybody has ever made to feel guilty that they haven't read anything by Christopher West or haven't read anything by John Paul II, I would say to them, be at peace. Be at peace. Make sure that when you engage in sexual intimacy with someone, that someone is of the opposite gender, and that you are married to him or her, and that you are pledged to be faithful to him or her, and that person to you. and that you are pledged to be permanently with that person and he or she to you, and that if you are still of childbearing age or child-generating age, that you leave your acts of intimacy free from any artificial barrier to conception. And if you say amen to all those, I say go in peace. And if you really want to know more about the theology of the body, give me a call.
Okay. Hey, as just a final note, this is more on the lighter side of it. It is interesting how a lot of the theology of the body, again, it just focuses on the sexuality usually, and certainly it seems to me in my readings of it, it's about the human person and the dignity of the human person through the body itself. I want to know, in your opinion, the clothes that we wear, the demeanor in our external, don't these play just as much of a very special part in God's plan for us in the use of our body as the sexuality does?
Well, I don't know that I would go so far as to say the clothes that we wear and the demeanor, because we are, each one of us is either male or female, and a male can wear female clothing or a female can wear male clothing, but that doesn't change the underlying reality to the best of my knowledge. I think what we need to say is this, that sex is more than that those parts of the body that are obviously anatomically sexual. Okay, we're not talking exclusively about the reproductive organs. For example, if I were to clip my fingernails and later on someone were to pick up one of those fingernail clippings and take it back to a forensic lab, having no idea where it came from, and were to analyze it, that person would be able to determine that came from a male rather than from a female. You would say, well, what do you mean? Your fingernail clippings are either male or female? Is it true? Every cell in my body is male, as is every cell in your body male. Now, what could be more non-sexual, we would say, than a fingernail clipping? And yet that carries, the chromosomes, the DNA that distinguish me as male as opposed to female. Therefore, every part of the human body is sexual. Okay. Something that some people don't realize, I think, is this. When we are resurrected from the dead, we will continue to be either male or female. Okay. So our female or maleness, femaleness or maleness is a permanent part of our identity. All of us human beings belong to certain categories. Some of us are Caucasian, some of us are black, some of us are Oriental. I don't think that will perdure into the next life. I don't think that there will be different, racial distinctions. I don't think that will be irrelevant. Some of us are Lithuanians, some of us are Armenians, some of us are Irish, some of us are Brazilian, Well, that'll be irrelevant in the next life. But whether you are male or female, it will be totally irrelevant. We will always be male and always be female.
So, in summary, we need an overall respect for our sexuality and our bodies and how they are presented, to other persons. They have to be done. It has to be done with great respect and appropriateness.
Oh yes, because when I present my body, I am presenting myself. I am presenting my soul, my whole being.
Yes, very good. Well, that's all the time we have, Father. Thank you. Please go to our website, www.roadtocana.com, for more resources and for these programs. Make them available to others in the cause of helping those who are preparing for marriage in any way or are married. And remember, while you're on this road, to trust in God's plan for you and to keep Christ's peace with you always.
On the road.